Welcome to our last video introducing some of the rules we use for trig substitutions. We are going to be looking at the odd even identities and really focusing on these first two here, the sine and cosine identities that we see here. So just kind of realizing that if we have an angle, we'll call that angle x, that sine of negative x equals negative sine of x. So as we go from one to the other, the sign switches. But for something like cosine of negative x equals the same thing as cosine of x. Again, thinking about why that works. You will not necessarily need to prove this. We're just looking at maybe some examples of how we know it works. So again, I'm going to use some sketchpad pictures to show you that. So if we were to start in this picture with looking at an angle of about 63 degrees. In green we see positive 63 degrees, so we're starting right here and going up. And in red we see negative 63 degrees, so we're going from here and going down. These are the x and y values that you would get from that. So remember, x is cosine and y is sine. As we go up and we think about the y value, or sine of this angle, sine of 63 degrees gets us 0.892, but sine of negative 63 degrees gets us negative 0.892. And as I move this value around, you're going to see that that's always the relationship. To make these two things equal, so we have sine of the positive angle and then sine of the negative angle. To actually make these two numbers equal, we would have to take this number at the top and switch the sign. So we're going to take the opposite of sine of the angle, and it's going to equal the same thing as sine of that negative angle. I know in words that might sound kind of confusing. So look at the picture again. Focus on these two numbers, and as I go through here, you're going to see they always have the same numerical value, but they have opposite signs. Okay, and then if we focus on the cosine rule for just a second. So cosine deals with x, whether it's a positive, in this case about 30 degrees, or negative 30 degrees, the cosine values of that angle, or the x values on the unit circle, are exactly the same. So in this case about 0.872. And as I move those two values around, they will always be the same. So again, if I go back to our list of rules here, as we look at sine of x right in this area, to make it equal sine of the negative version of that angle, I need to switch the signs right here. I need to put a negative symbol right there. But for cosine, I don't need to. Cosine of this positive angle will be the same thing as cosine of that same angle but negative. Again, I know in words that sounds kind of confusing, but hopefully that sketchpad file showed you a few examples of that, and we will practice that in class.